Creatine is arguably one of the best bang for your buck muscle building and performance supplements on the market today. It's backed by plenty of real results and a ton of research regarding its effects on body composition and performance, and it's often overlooked for its massive benefits for overall health. In this video, we go over what creatine is exactly, how it works, and what place it might have in your overall program. We'll also cover what form of creatine and dosages work best, the potential side effects, and why you're likely being ripped off and sold bogus information when it comes to this supplement. Make sure you stick around to the end of this video too, where you'll discover what a lot of the supplement companies and influencers aren't telling you about creatine. Now let's first start out with what creatine is exactly, how it works, and how it might help you. To understand how creatine works, we first have to understand the three main energy pathways of the body, namely the ATP phosphocreatine system, which is for short but very intense efforts lasting up to 10 seconds or less, the glycolytic system, which is for high intensity efforts lasting up to a few minutes, and the oxidative system, which is for lower intensity efforts lasting up to multiple hours. All three pathways work concurrently to a degree, but certain ones will become predominant depending on the intensity of the given activity and its duration. Most of our attention will be focused on the ATP phosphocreatine system for this video, as this is the one that's most relevant to creatine. To best explain this, let's use an analogy in simple terms and say you're in the gym lifting heavy and trying to build muscle. Initially, the stored energy in your muscles, which is glycogen, is converted into glucose in a process called glycolysis. The glucose is then broken down to create adenosine triphosphate, or ATP, which is your body's usable energy source and enables your muscles to contract intensely. In the energy production process, one of the phosphates is taken away and you're left with two phosphates, or adenosine diphosphate. ADP is not a usable energy source for our activity, and we need to keep producing more ATP to meet the energy demands. Hence, we need to turn the ADP back into ATP by adding a phosphate back. And this is the point where creatine phosphate comes in. The creatine phosphate, which is naturally stored in your muscle, is added to the ADP so that it can become ATP once again, and the energy demands for the activity can be met. The higher the initial creatine stores there are within your muscles, the better the capacity there is for meeting the demands of the activity, which in this case is lifting heavy weights in the gym. When you're lifting heavy in the gym and you deplete your ATP, it will usually take your system a couple of minutes to replenish most of the ATP required for the intense activity. If your muscle stores are saturated with creatine to begin with, this can mean that you can now have the capacity to push out a couple of extra reps at the same given intensity. There have also been many studies showing that creatine can help increase the weight and allow you to go a bit heavier than usual for a given set at lower rep ranges. It might not seem like much, but a couple of extra reps and an increase in weight consistently will add up to better performance and increased muscle growth over time. If you're looking to increase your capacity at higher rep ranges or activities that require more of your glycolytic energy system, then be sure to check out my video on the supplement beta-alanine. The link is in the description below. Supplementing with creatine has proven to be highly effective for increasing strength, power, and muscle mass. How much benefit you derive from creatine though, or what level of response you get from this supplement, comes down to your predominant muscle fiber type and how deficient your muscle creatine stores are to begin with. If you have a greater proportion of fast twitch fibers to slow twitch fibers, and you naturally do better at strength and power-based activities, you should respond fairly well to creatine. If on the other hand, you do better with endurance-based activities and have a greater proportion of slow twitch muscle fibers, you likely won't respond to creatine as well. The initial level of creatine you have stored in your muscles is also a major factor too regarding how well you will respond. Most people are usually anywhere from 10 to 40% deficient in creatine, and it's very hard to get enough creatine from the food you eat. Meats have the highest amount of naturally occurring creatine of all foods, but even if you eat a lot of meat, you still might be creatine deficient. For instance, red meat has a high amount of creatine content with around 5 grams of creatine per kilogram. However, it's very unlikely that you're eating that much meat each day to keep your muscle creatine stores topped up. Vegetarians are often even more creatine deficient because they don't eat any meats. This group will usually get the best results from supplementing creatine because they're already getting very little creatine from their diet. Knowing how difficult it is for both vegetarians and carnivores to saturate muscle creatine stores using food, supplementing with creatine definitely seems like the smarter thing to do in terms of both practicality and price. With that said, let's now turn our attention to the various types of creatine on the market today and see how they all weigh up. Before going any further, I'm going to save you a lot of time and frustration. In this section, I'm going to be frank with you and start by saying that to date, there is no better form of creatine than creatine monohydrate. The vast majority of creatine's performance, body composition, and health benefits come from research conducted on this form of creatine. All of the other forms of creatine either jump on the same bandwagon when it comes to the research data, all the supplement companies or influencers touting their more superior forms of creatine either use an isolated study or play on some invented side effect that their product is meant to solve. Here is a comprehensive list of creatine forms that have been promoted above creatine monohydrate over the years. Many of these creatine products were touted as superior to the monohydrate form for reasons like they get into your system better, or that they have greater muscular uptake and absorption, or they even enable you to take smaller doses that are more potent. However, no data has yet to convincingly show that any other form of creatine works better than the original creatine monohydrate. Creatine monohydrate by far remains the most extensively studied form of creatine in terms of benefits, efficacy, and safety. The only consistent thing these alternative forms of creatine have over monohydrate is their price. They can be sold for far more than plain old creatine monohydrate by the supplement companies and influencers that promote them. And if these supplement companies and influencers don't try to sell you on the purported benefits of their form of creatine product, they'll likely work on relieving you of unsubstantiated side effects of regular creatine monohydrate, like decreased bloating or digestion issues. We'll cover more on the reported side effects of creatine a little later on, but for now, you can be well assured that you won't get any extra value from these other forms of creatine. One thing I will say though about the type of creatine you should consider is where it is from and how it is processed and tested for quality and purity. Most of the commercial brand creatine monohydrate comes from two main areas of wholesale supply, and that is China and Germany. Creatine produced in Germany is frequently tested and consistently high in quality and purity, and this type of creatine comes under the name Creapure, which is not a brand of creatine per se, but rather the pharmaceutical grade of creatine that denotes the quality and purity of the German manufacturers. You can look for this trademark on whatever label of creatine monohydrate you're considering buying, and you can trust that the German manufacturers do a lot of work to protect this patent and its misuse. In comparison to the German manufacturing process, Chinese produced creatine on average results in higher levels of contaminants in the manufacturing process. Chinese manufacturers conduct far less quality control and testing of their creatine products, and it's unclear as to whether the high level of contaminants in cheaper Chinese creatine causes any adverse side effects. The Chinese are getting better at the manufacturing process, but for now, I'd put my money and my peace of mind on Creapure creatine, as it's more assuredly higher in quality and free from contaminants. Which brings us to an important but often overlooked aspect of creatine monohydrate. Many supplement companies draw your attention towards the type or form of creatine they use and draw your attention away from the quality of the creatine they use. Creatine with less purity will not only give you a lower dose of what you actually need, but it may also expose you to some unknown nasties as well. This is definitely something worth considering when sourcing your creatine. Now that we are clear on what type of creatine is best, let's take a look at the various dosing protocols out there and the relative advantages and disadvantages of each. Depending on how patient you are for results and how much work you're willing to make for yourself, there are different methods you can use to saturate your muscle creatine stores. The first method takes more effort and will load your muscles quicker, and this consists of a loading phase followed by a maintenance phase. During the first 5 to 7 days, you take 0.3 grams of creatine per kilogram of body weight each day in divided doses to maximize your muscle creatine stores. Thereafter, you take 0.03 grams of creatine monohydrate per kilogram of body weight each day to maintain your elevated muscle creatine stores. Alternatively, you can just skip the loading phase and go straight to the maintenance phase dose. Under this low dose protocol, you'll eventually saturate your creatine stores within 30 days, as opposed to the 5 to 7 days with the loading phase. When doing the maintenance phase in either method, I recommend using the 0.03 grams per kilogram of body weight dose instead of the general advice of taking 3 to 5 grams of creatine per day. This is because smaller body sizes will need far less creatine and will waste half as much creatine in the process. For instance, if you weigh 80 kilograms, you'll only need half of the standard size 5 gram scoop, and this means your supply of creatine will last you twice as long and only cost you half the price. There is also no need to cycle your creatine, as some suggest, as there is no scientific foundation or advantage in doing this compared to the loading or low dose protocols. If you're wondering how long creatine lasts in your system, the washout period is the same as the low dose saturation period, which is roughly 30 days. And no, you will not lose any of the muscle you gain during a washout period, you'll simply lose some of the fluid from your cells, which in turn reduces your overall muscle volume. Given that one of creatine's main effects is cell volumization, don't forget that you need something to volumize your cells with, namely water. As a general rule, drink half of your body weight in pounds in ounces of water. So if you're 200 pounds, you'll need about 100 ounces of water per day. Now you're probably wondering if there's a preferable time to take creatine each day. Well, creatine has a cumulative effect and it's not going to give you a burst of energy when you take it, despite what some pre-workout supplements claim. As long as your cells are saturated with creatine after either a loading phase or a low dose protocol for 30 days, when you take it matters very little. However, if you don't have much creatine in your system and you're looking to load it quicker, there is a decent amount of evidence to suggest that taking creatine after training is more effective for muscle gain than at other times of the day. It appears that the uptake of creatine is faster around this time because of the elevated insulin levels after intense exercise. Large doses of simple carbs and proteins will also jack up insulin concentrations even higher, and they seem to enhance muscle creatine uptake after training. Before drawing any conclusions about whether creatine causes bloating or gastrointestinal discomfort, it's first wise to consider that you're actually dissolving the creatine properly before you take it. Most common mistake that people make with creatine is putting it in cold protein shake or other solution. Cold water is not very soluble, and creatine has to be dissolved in order for the body to absorb it. Hence, it's best to put your creatine in warm but not boiling water and make sure it's stirred well and dissolved before drinking it. This will prevent you from getting gastrointestinal issues and also ensure that you get more of the creatine in your system instead of having a large part of it precipitate to the bottom of your drink. A standard 5-gram scoop of creatine should dissolve in about 250 ml of water as shown, and if you take more creatine, you'll need to add more water. Also, using a finer creatine monohydrate powder like the micronized version will ensure better solubility and absorption than typical granulated versions and further minimize the chance of any negative GI side effects. Despite all of this, you may still experience some GI issues such as diarrhea and bloating if you're doing a loading phase of 20 grams or more of creatine per day. And in this case, try spreading out your doses more throughout the day and ensure that you're well hydrated. If you're still having your insides play up, then doing the low dose protocol of taking 0.03 grams of creatine per kilogram of body weight per day is a better option and should eliminate your GI issues entirely. When it comes to bloating too, you'll sometimes see supplement companies and influencers play on this from a different angle. They'll claim that regular creatine monohydrate will cause a watery and puffy look around your body, and that their revolutionary form of creatine won't give you this inflated look. Well, I have some news for you. Creatine is intracellular and it draws water where you want it, which is inside your muscle cells. There is no subcutaneous water under your skin making you bloated, and there have been numerous studies debunking this nonsense. With this knowledge, this fact also has implications for when you're leaning down. There is no need to stop taking creatine if you're cutting fat. Even if you're trying to get really shredded, your muscles will look fuller and larger on creatine, and there's no need to cycle off it. If you think creatine makes you look bloated or fatter, this is likely because you put on more weight than you thought, and you're often mistaking this for bloating. Or it could be that you're not digesting your creatine properly, like in the case we covered earlier. If a brand's advertising is telling you that their particular creatine does not cause water retention or bloating, it's complete BS. In fact, if somebody claims that their creatine does not cause water retention, it's essentially saying that their creatine doesn't work. You want water being drawn into the muscle and retained, as this is beneficial for performance, but it also volumizes the muscle and makes it larger. Now that we have that out of the way, you've likely heard of some other unsubstantiated side effects of creatine being thrown around. These include hair loss, kidney and liver damage, rhabdo and muscle compartment syndrome, dehydration, impaired thermoregulation, and cramping. In response to these, let me just say that you won't go bald taking creatine, even though there's one isolated study on rugby players that many people erroneously refer to. The myth that creatine causes liver and kidney damage has been debunked by numerous studies. Creatine has also never been proven to cause rhabdo or muscle compartment syndrome, and there are no studies showing evidence of dehydration, impaired thermoregulation, or cramping. In regards to the last one though, cramping, although there are no studies that I'm aware of that show creatine can cause cramping, I have heard anecdotally and even from a small number of clients that I've coached that some people do experience cramping when taking creatine. And this is when the rest of their diet has been highly monitored and unaltered. However, for the most part, cramping issues appear to be rare, and there is very little scientific evidence for it when it comes to creatine. In fact, creatine by and large has been proven to be one of the safest supplements around, and it's been in limited use since the 1960s and has been in widespread use since the 1990s. To date, there haven't been any studies that support any adverse side effects for supplementing with creatine. In fact, it's quite the contrary when it comes to this supplement, and there are many underappreciated performance, body composition, and health benefits that come from taking it regularly. Let's take a quick look at these now. As we've seen earlier, creatine supports energy production, enhances strength and power output, while also allowing for more total work to be performed. In addition to these performance enhancements, creatine reduces muscle protein breakdown and is excellent for recovery and assisting with muscle growth. Virtually all studies that tested creatine's effects on muscle damage resulting from weight training found that it decreased oxidative stress, it reduced inflammation and delayed onset muscle soreness, and it sped up the recovery process. And because phosphocreatine is already naturally occurring in your muscle cells, supplementing with creatine will help to draw more water inside your muscles and provide a hydrating effect that is conducive to both better performance and enhanced muscle building. The fact that most people gain weight so rapidly after taking creatine tells you that a large amount of the weight gain is water. Although muscle is 75% water, you can be assured that with longer term use of creatine, muscle gain will accompany the increases in total body water. In fact, to date, no supplement has as much support for increasing lean body mass as creatine. Within a month or so of taking creatine, it's reasonable to expect that you'll gain at least 2 to 3 pounds of lean mass. That's assuming though that you're also on a strength training program that is intense enough and there's progressive overload. Which brings us to a popular question. Should you use creatine when you're trying to lean down? My suggestion would be yes. As alluded to earlier, creatine won't make you puffy, bloated, or watery as some suggest. The whole mechanism by which creatine works is by drawing water into the muscle cells where you need it. This alone will make your muscles rounder and fuller, while at the same time providing your muscle cells with extra energy to keep your strength elevated. Hence, these factors make creatine an awesome supplement for retaining muscle mass at a time that it's often lost when dieting down and losing weight. And speaking of losing weight, let's now look at some of the other health benefits associated with creatine. Creatine isn't just a supplement for meatheads. Nearly everyone from young to old could potentially benefit from its regular use. Among its benefits in fighting many other health complications, creatine has been shown to strengthen heart function, lower blood sugar, and aid in bone repair and arthritis. How does creatine do these things? Well, when it comes to the heart, the cells of the heart rely on adequate levels of ATP, the body's energy source we discussed earlier. And these levels are invariably low in people with various heart conditions who often suffer from low energy levels and rapid fatigue. The increased production of ATP associated with creatine has been shown to make heart patients stronger and more resistant to tiring. When it comes to those with type 2 diabetes and low blood sugar, creatine helps with insulin sensitivity and increases the rate at which muscles uptake glucose from the blood. This is hardly something to be scoffed at if you have diabetes and blood sugar issues. Furthermore, when it comes to patients with fibromyalgia who have chronically low creatine phosphate levels, creatine has proven to be highly effective with managing pains and other associated symptoms. It doesn't stop there with creatine either. Creatine also helps with muscle wastage, whether it be from various associated diseases, but also from general inactivity as we age. Muscles aren't the only tissue that creatine has an impact on. Creatine can also increase the formation of osteoblasts, which are the cells that construct bone. This should be of particular interest to those who are suffering from arthritis. In addition to the physical health benefits associated with creatine's use, the cognitive and mental benefits are also huge. Even if you don't have any cognitive disorders, we all have creatine in our brains, and creatine has been proven to be just as good, if not better, at enhancing the mind as it does the body. Studies have shown that creatine can help with a wide variety of neuromuscular diseases like MS, while also producing neuroprotective abilities for those suffering from brain injuries or other conditions. Creatine can also improve memory formation and retention, and possibly deter Alzheimer's and other neurodegenerative diseases as well. Vegetarians who supplement with creatine tend to experience more cognitive benefits relative to omnivores, and this is due to the fact that they don't eat meat and tend to be more creatine deficient. Creatine hasn't always been shown to increase cognition in omnivores, but it has been more proven to increase speed and reaction time. Oh, and if you're sleep deprived, you'll also likely experience the cognitive benefits associated with creatine. If you're still not convinced with all the performance, health, and body composition benefits of creatine, my advice to you is that it's well worth experimenting for yourself. It's not going to cost you much to do so, because the best part about creatine as a supplement is that it's super cheap. That is, if you're buying the monohydrate form and you're not falling for the other overinflated forms of creatine out there that are peddled by the supplement companies and other influencers. With everything covered in this video, I think creatine has a place in everybody's life, and I would argue that the health benefits are even greater than the performance and body composition benefits with this supplement. The nootropic effects of creatine should not be ignored either, and it might just turn out to be that creatine is the best performance in anti-aging supplement around in terms of what it can do mentally and physically. Yes, creatine works great for increasing strength, power, and muscle mass with chronic use. However, you won't see results from creatine unless you're applying progressive overload and you're pushing yourself to perform better on a consistent basis. Don't get excited about new forms of overpriced creatine along with one-off isolated studies about purported benefits and minimized side effects. Studies come to incorrect or outlying conclusions all the time and need to be replicated before being taken seriously. The people pushing supplement products to you also need to be taken seriously, with a good measure of factual research being used to substantiate their claims. I trust you got a lot out of this video, and if you found value in it, then feel free to donate to the channel via the icon below, as this will really help out and enable me to bring you the best and most up-to-date information on training and nutrition in the future. If you're interested in learning more about how to build an athletic body, then be sure to like this video and subscribe so you don't miss any of our future content and videos. Thanks for watching, and see you next time.